In August of 2019, a terrible thing happened to me. I didn't know if I was going to be able to recover from it. Everything that's going through your head, the emotions, the shame, the guilt, feeling sorry for yourself, feeling inadequate. How did it happen? How could I let it happen? Why did it happen? This is the story of my journey to redemption. So I was really excited in 1986 to start taking flying lessons. It seemed like something that was important in my life at that point. I guess I was looking for the adventure, the excitement of mastering a new skill, seeing the world from a different perspective, being a part of an elite group. All these things came into play. I love mechanical things also, so there was that aspect to it. It took me a couple of summers, and finally at the end of August in 1987, I was able to take my check ride and get my private pilot certificate. That was an exciting time for me. That was the beginning of my senior year of college out in New Jersey. And I flew a couple times out there, took some friends up. It was exciting to get out and explore something different out there. But after I graduated in June of '88, I actually didn't fly much. I was busy traveling after graduation and didn't fly until March of '89. Only flew a couple times in March and April. Anyway, I'd started a new job and I was distracted by that, wanting to work a lot to impress my new boss. And so I wasn't flying much. I only flew a couple times in March and April. Finally, there was a day in early May of 1989. I went out to fly, feeling nervous about it. It was a busy morning out at Centennial Airport. It took me a while to even go through the line to get to take off. I went out to the practice area south and east of the airport, did some maneuvers, tried to, shake some of the rust off and feel like I was in control again. I was doing some slow flight. I intended to be at 8,000 feet, but I was like 78 or 7,900 feet doing slow flight. And all of a sudden, like right in the windscreen, there was this airplane just going from right to left. Phew. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was like, wow, that was close. Glad he didn't hit me. I guess he was coming in from the east somewhere, probably from Kansas, thinking about landing at Centennial, wasn't even looking around. This was before ADSB, obviously. That really shook me, really scared me. Headed back to the airport, put the airplane away. I decided I didn't really have enough time to feel safe flying at that point and to stay proficient. This proficiency thing I didn't know was going to be a nagging thing for me throughout my flying career. My girlfriend was going to move in with me in Denver, worried about my career and everything else. So I just decided to put flying aside at that point and took a hiatus. Since I was a teenager, my family has had a property in the small northern New Mexico town of Regina, named by settlers from the city of the same name in Canada. Regina's billed as being 100 miles from anywhere: Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and Farmington. While my parents were still around, it was a short hop over the mountains from Denver in my dad's Cheyenne II turboprop to the nearby Lindrith airstrip that was part of an oil field base camp. I flew in the right seat whenever I could, absorbing every move the pilot made. Well, that hiatus was a little longer than I thought. And it wasn't until November of 2010 that I finally got back in the airplane. Went through the steps to get my medical again and found an instructor and headed up. It actually came back surprisingly quickly, probably 8 or 10 hours total before he signed me off just to fly on my own again. That was the end of 2010. I flew through 2011 and started working towards my instrument rating in the winter of 2011, 2012. Started working on studying for the written test. Thought I was ready. Had a slight distraction in that I had a herniated disc and had to have surgery done on that in April. But I was really eager to get going on getting the rating. And so maybe too early from that, I decided to take the written test in May of 2012. And of course, I failed it. So this was another turning point for me when I failed the written exam. About the same time I failed the exam, I bought my first Turbo 206G, and then I just got totally distracted in flying VFR, decided to put the instrument rating to the side and just concentrate on visual flying. A couple of months later, I landed on a neighbor's 1,700-foot grass strip with an airline pilot CFI buddy coaching me down. I practiced again on my own on the 3,400-foot dirt airstrip at Lindrith, about 10 miles away from our house. It was a mild autumn that year, and I was able to fly down to Lindrith for Thanksgiving week. It was great fun taking family and friends on scenic flights around the area, including over nearby Chaco Canyon. I had so much fun that Thanksgiving that I decided I needed a closer airstrip that I could walk to our house from. And in the spring of 2013, convinced my siblings to let me blade out a 1,700-foot runway on our property, the longest flat area I could find. I was understandably nervous on my first trip there in May, the day before my 49th birthday, but the landing worked great, and it started a new era of travel for me. I came down 4 more times that year, and periodically in the following years. The summer of 2019 was another kind of crossroads for me. I was trying to step up my flying and use the 206 for what I really wanted to do, which was to fly my family down to New Mexico and back. Yeah, so early in the summer of 2019, I flew down there and my wife drove our car down there. We met some friends, actually had a couple adventures in the airplane, flew over Chaco Canyon, did some other stuff. And then we left the car there. She flew back with me with our daughter and our dog and loaded everything up. That's exactly what I wanted to do with the 206. Anyway, we kept trying to get back down there through the summer. Finally, in middle August, we were able to fly down there again with my daughter, dog, stuff. We had a lovely time there, had an incredible sunset the last night we were there. In the morning, I knew that we had a tight schedule to get back to Denver. My daughter had some appointment at noon in Denver. And so, I was trying to move along with getting the airplane ready to go, getting it packed up and get going. My wife was running a little late since she was visiting a friend, picking up some of their fresh grown vegetables actually. But then they rushed over. We all jumped in the airplane, got it started, warmed up, ready to go. Everything looked normal. And I did what I normally do, go to full power, check the engine gauges, everything looked good. Then off we go on the ground roll. And I'm thinking, okay, we're accelerating, airspeed's looking good. Well, maybe a little low. Okay, get halfway. Still seemed like we were like 80% of the takeoff airspeed. Then things happened really quickly at that point. Oh, I will say that on the ground roll, I felt like I had to put excessive right rudder in to counteract the torque factor from the turbocharged engine. That seemed new to me. Past halfway down, seeing the end of the runway came up pretty quickly, 1,700-foot runway. I might have said oh shit to my wife. We got off the ground, but then immediately boom, we came right back down. I was totally stunned by that. Within a couple of seconds, the airplane had slid to a stop. I'm just like, oh my God, what just happened? I look at my wife, I look around. Luckily, everybody's okay, but oh my God, we crashed. I can't even think, just the danger that I put my family into by doing that. And I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. Somebody called 911. So State Patrol showed up pretty quickly. Ambulance showed up. Luckily, we didn't need it. Started talking to the state patrolman, explaining everything. He thinks we have a bunch of junk in the back of the airplane, doesn't know that it's a capable airplane, and we weren't actually at even max gross weight. I feel my cell phone buzz, and I look at it, and somehow I figured out it was the NTSB calling right when the state patrol walked up and handed me his phone and said, "Here, talk to the FAA," the beginning of the next step of the process. Headed back to Denver, contacted the AOPA legal services, found a lawyer in Denver. Actually, it was the whole process was pretty pain-free looking back at it. Didn't know that at that time, but had a brief conversation with the FAA FSDO guys down in Albuquerque. They were happy that nobody was hurt. They were just curious what had happened. I literally got a brief email saying, be careful about density altitude and pilot error. That's what we attributed it to. Obviously nothing wrong with the airplane. So what did happen? I'd successfully taken off from this airstrip a number of times in the past. Why not this time? I quickly ruled out any mechanical issues since the engine was making full power and there was no change to that as we rolled down the runway. I calculated our weight at just under 3,300 pounds, 300 pounds less than the max gross weight of 3,600. The next thought was density altitude, of course. Using weather information from nearby Cuba and the field elevation is 7,450 feet, the density altitude calculated out at 9,200 feet. High, but not unacceptable with the turbocharger. The last potential culprit was my soft field takeoff technique. I'd obviously taken off successfully from this airstrip in the past. What changed this time? Well, about 6 weeks before the crash, I had my biennial flight review. And during that, I asked the instructor to go over my soft field takeoff technique. And somehow, I came away from that session thinking I had to aggressively pull back on the yoke to increase the angle of attack and protect the nose wheel. We practiced a few times on a 5,000 foot long asphalt runway, and I thought I had the technique refreshed in my mind. Before I look at why that didn't work, I want to figure out what the right technique should be. I thought I should remind myself what the Pilot Operating Handbook recommends, and started in the normal procedures section. Normal takeoff, short field. Short field, 20 degrees of flaps, brakes, full power, adjust to make sure you have 31 gallons. Release the brakes, slightly tail low attitude, and then 68 knots until all obstacles are cleared. I continued on to the amplified procedures section to see what I could glean from that. Takeoff. Full power wing flap settings, reduce soft field. Hey, here's the first mention of soft field. Soft field takeoffs are performed with 20 degrees flaps by lifting the nose wheel off the ground as soon as practical. Lifting the nose wheel off the ground and leaving the ground in a slightly tail low attitude. That language seems a little vague, so I looked at the Airplane Flying Handbook published by the FAA and found a whole section of soft rough field takeoff and climb that I thought was very useful. First of all, it says, to minimize the hazards associated with takeoffs from soft or rough fields, the pilot should transfer the support of the airplane's weight as rapidly as possible from the wheels to the wings as the takeoff roll proceeds by establishing and maintaining a relatively high AOA, or angle of attack, or nose-high pitch attitude as early as possible. So, of course, it says during the takeoff roll, as the airplane accelerates, the pilot should apply enough back elevator pressure to establish a positive AOA. That still seems a little ambiguous to me. And of course, when you scroll down into the common errors section of this, it says one of the errors is insufficient back elevator pressure during initial takeoff roll, resulting in inadequate AOA. So far, none of this really makes a distinction between normally aspirated and turbocharged aircraft, the latter having more thrust available at high density altitudes that will help force the tail down and increase the angle of attack. I know some of you are thinking that the way to navigate through this minefield of nuance is to just hire an instructor and practice. But that's exactly what I thought I had done. So as I started my takeoff roll the day of the crash, I applied the technique as I had recently learned from the instructor, but must have overdone it. My brother and wife later remarked that they thought the tail was too low and was going to hit the ground. I did notice after the crash that the paint had been worn off the bottom of the tail, but don't know if that happened during the crash. So what's the risk of overdoing it? The cross-sectional area of the plane is large with 20 degrees of flaps, but only increases with increasing angle of attack, greatly increasing the parasitic drag and slowing the acceleration of the airplane, requiring the need for more runway. Okay, technique aside, I am aware that there were a couple of big red flag mitigating factors that led me down the chain to the accident. First of all, the need to get back to Denver for an appointment put me in a rush state of mind. I was basically committed to taking off when I started moving, and did not have a proper go, no-go point in mind. Then it hit me all at once. I had not sought out the proper in-depth training from an expert on this kind of flying, and that was totally on me. Started working with the insurance company. Of course, that's when you find out where the rubber hits the road with the insurance company. First thing you do is determine your eligibility for coverage. Gee, I thought I was covered already, but no, they go through your logbooks and everything and make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, all that stuff. But everything worked out. In the meantime, I was like, well, do I keep flying or is this it? It was a brief conversation in my head, luckily, and with my wife. She knew that flying was my passion. So she's like, do whatever you have to do, basically. So, about 3 weeks after the crash, I got checked out in a 172 at the Aspen Flying Club at Centennial and started flying again. Once it was clear I was going to get paid by the insurance company, I got the check. Started looking around for another airplane. This 206 popped up at the end of November down in Phoenix. So the day after Thanksgiving in 2019, which we spent in Regina, actually. We got up early, went to Albuquerque Airport, and I flew over to Phoenix and met my broker over there. We took the airplane out for a flight, greased the landing. Even though it had been a couple months, I decided that was the airplane to get. So about a week later, after they had done the annual inspection, I headed back out there and flew back to Denver with my new 206 756 Mike Yankee. One of the problems during the purchase is that I figured out that nobody wanted to give me insurance. This just one thing after another. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I decided to buy the airplane anyway and to fly without insurance. Obviously, that limited what I could do. So it was a big stumbling point for me at that point and was going to hold me back, but at least I could fly again. I decided I would not take anybody up in the airplane. It would just be me, and I'd see what I could do to get through it. So I was flying Young Eagles with my old airplane, but I decided, obviously without insurance, that I wouldn't do that. And so I worked on ground for a while, for all of 2020 and into 2021, just so I could still be there and help out and be a part of the group. It's interesting the way things happen in life, right? Because at our rally in March, I was helping on the ground, and I just happened to meet this guy there and started talking to him, and we were watching all the airplanes, and even after we were done with the rally, we were watching what was going on at the airport and talking. Eventually, I figured out from him that he was an insurance agent, and I was like, oh, interesting. And I described my problem to him. I was kind of worried about that. I said I'd been trying through various insurance companies to get insurance, even that was at that point over a year after the crash. And he said, oh yeah, I can help you with that. And I thought, oh, great. This is like the beginning of the end, the light at the end of the tunnel. Wow, things happened quickly then. The rally was on Saturday. On Monday, we emailed each other. He started talking to companies. And by Friday, I had signed up with an insurance company, and I was able to fly again with passengers. Yeah, that was such a relief to get insurance. And the way it happened, it just was unbelievable to me. It was a shock. And it was really felt like a good thing because I could, really start doing what I wanted to do again with flying. So it was the best day of my life. One of my goals when I got insurance was to go and get the right training. The crash was a time that told me that I just had asked the wrong person to help me out. I had been reading about the school up in McCall, Idaho for mountain and canyon flying. And I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. Actually, I tried to do it in 2020, but because I didn't have insurance, you ride with the instructor in your airplane, and they wouldn't allow me to take the class if I didn't have insurance. So the next year when I got the insurance, I put my whole plan into action. The 206 I bought had just the stock wing that comes with it. After careful consideration, I decided on getting the Sportsman stole. And I also wanted the Vortex generators as well. I put that whole plan into action, talked to my shop. So in May of that year, they installed the stole kit. In July of 21, I was finally able to go up to McCall and do the 3-day class. And that was a great experience for me overall. 3 days with an instructor in my airplane, got new turbos, got the right technique for the takeoff, not pulling back too far, but just enough to get the nose wheel a little light, but you can still control the airplane and protect it, and then take off. Nose over, more aggressive than I thought, but that nose over, staying in ground effect, and then eventually the airplane accelerates, and even with that attitude, just sort of rises on up, and you're set to go. So it was great. I was kind of on the road again. For a couple years, I had been thinking about joining the group called LightHawk to do volunteer conservation flying for them. I was on board to be one of their volunteer pilots, but of course, one of their requirements is that they're named on your insurance policy. I took it to my insurance broker, and they declined covering my actions with LightHawk. That was kind of a blow to me. But then they said, well, maybe if you get an instrument rating, we'd reconsider. I was like, okay, well, this might be the time to revisit that. And so I found an instructor, and we started up again. I still felt a little stigma about the written exam, but we started flying in my airplane. I signed up with Sporties and started studying for the exam. Really nervous about it. Eventually took the exam, passed it with a 92 or a 94. On September 1st of 2022, I took the check ride. I kept thinking, he's going to tell me if I failed anything, and we did a couple of approaches. I did 2 by hand, knowing that I could use the autopilot on 1. And he hadn't said anything that I had failed. So on the 3rd one, it was the GPS approach into Greeley. And I used the autopilot all the way. Just didn't want to mess that one up at that point. And landed, and he shook my hand and said I'd passed. So that was such an awesome feeling at that point, just to get that wrapped up. So of course, the next day, I went back to my insurance agent and I said, hey, okay, I got this, I got my instrument rating. Take that to the insurance company and see if they're going to put their money where the mouth was. And luckily they did. And I took that back to LightHawk. And it wasn't until August of the next year. In the meantime, I was taking pictures and doing trips. I went out to Page to look at Lake Powell and discovered some stuff out there, working on a project in Texas and Oklahoma. And, I was finally getting to what I really wanted to do with the airplane. And it just felt great. So, and then later in 2023, I was able to start doing some missions for LightHawk. Did a really tough one, transporting a Condor from Boise to San Diego. And it was in December, watching the weather. It really expanded my flying abilities. And then in 2024, I really hit it hard with them, doing a number of missions with them. That's exactly where I want to be with the airplane, doing that kind of stuff. Glad I'm able to do it. In 2024, I knew it was the 5-year anniversary of the crash. I had this idea to go down and land and take off from that airstrip one more time. But, a number of mitigating factors kind of kept pushing that off. Most of all, that we'd made the decision to sell the property down there. And I didn't want to spend any money on the airstrip at that point. Also, I was busy doing other stuff. I feel like my journey to redemption was already in motion. And I didn't maybe need that one piece. It was more psychological piece at that point. Things are good. I'm doing a lot of volunteer flying for Young Eagles, which is really rewarding. And for LightHawk especially, get to go out and do that. Doing my photography, doing the YouTube videos. I don't need that action to make me feel good about myself. I did the right things afterwards. I got back at it. I realized what I had done wrong and what I needed to do. Got the training, got some more training. Anyway, I feel like I'm where I want to be with my flying. I fly enough to feel safe. I have some training. I have some options with the instrument rating to go out and get places that I need to. Life goes on, and I'm happy with where I'm at. And so I know that flying is my calling, and so I'm just going to keep on flying, going down the road, doing what I do. And that's all the redemption I need.